We watch the anger being displayed before our eyes, on the street, on the subway, in the news. Some people are blaming this on persons who are out on bail. This program is not about apportioning blame. It's about understanding the bail laws, how it affects New Yorkers. My guest to discuss this is the lead sponsor of the bail reform law that was passed by the New York State Legislature in 2019. Also in this program, we'll meet a candidate for a Brooklyn State Senate seat. But we begin with a matter that's concerning and affecting hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers. Assemblymember Latrice Walker, welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you so much for having me, and it's good to be back, Sam.
There are opposing views on this bail reform law. For the thousands of people who don't really understand it, let's begin by you telling us, what is this law?
So bail reform took a look at the course of history where we had too many people who were detained pre-trial, who had not been convicted of any crimes, languishing on Rikers Island for years even. One of the most egregious situations where this took place was, of course, the late Kalief Browder, where Kalief eventually took his own life based on the inhumane conditions that he was caused to suffer in on Rikers Island. We all know the stories. And you took a look to say, well, how did we get here? And the Constitution indicates that slavery was abolished except in the case of criminal punishment. And so when a person is subjected to the criminal justice system, they are a slave in the truest form of slavery, which is why they can pay someone merely pennies for work in an organization that is state sanctioned called Core Craft, which is also why your right to vote can be taken away, a right that's enjoyed by all citizens of this country. It also involves why your Eighth Amendment right to have bail not be cruel and unusual punishment doesn't apply to you. Because the Constitution didn't speak to slaves when it was written, and it doesn't to date. And so we are basically fighting to ensure that misdemeanors and low-level nonviolent felonies are in a cashless bail system where an individual will receive on the first time a desk appearance ticket with a number of different nuances. If a police officer believes that a person's safety is at risk and it can institute a order protection, then that person will go into what's called custodial hold. They will be processed or they will be arraigned. If there is an open warrant, then that person is processed and or arraigned. If there is a situation where there may be a mental health scenario, the judges in those instances can order the 72-hour holds in accordance with the mental hygiene law. And so basically that's like the core and the gist of bail reform. One of the core tenets is to make sure that bail, which is the baseline in New York State jurisprudence, be about ensuring a person's return to court and not about pretrial sentencing or incarceration.
There are some people who believe that the bail reform law is to eliminate the problem we have in jails with overcrowding.
Well, I believe mass incarceration is a huge problem. And I don't believe that I think it's more so the other way. It's about allowing people to have a fighting chance at being able to be out as a defendant in their cases so that we don't have the number of wrongfully convicted defendants languishing on Rikers Island, so that we don't have a space where prosecutors have all the leverage and they go into Rikers Island and they say to individuals, well, we know you don't want to be in here anymore. And so if you take this plea, then we'll give you time served and you can walk out of here tomorrow. And in the meantime, you have a life of a sentence, a scarlet letter on your shirt which will always be over your head that you have a conviction on your rap sheet, whether or not you did it or you didn't, but you took that plea simply to get out of the hell that you were going through being incarcerated pre-trial.
So what is the connection between the plea deal, accepting a plea deal, or the judge's discretion of offering the person bail?
So in certain instances, with respect to misdemeanors and low-level nonviolent felonies, there were DATs. And so which meant that in those particular situations, there was no arraignment. A person came to court of their own volition. Now, if they did not come to court, then of course a warrant will be issued for their arrest, and then they will be brought through the system that way. In addition to that, if a person was out on bail reform and they committed a subsequent crime, then they would be brought before the system, and that particular crime becomes bail eligible. And then in regular situations where we're seeing the majority of our cases with respect to what we're feeling and sensing in our streets with respect to the shootings and public safety and the murders that we're all hoping that we don't have to live through anymore. Those offenses remained bail eligible, and judges had more tools, we believe, in their toolbox than they did. And if you did commit a felony, which is a violent felony, shoving, grand larceny, and a number of other cases, at one point in time, a judge will have bail or remand or release on your own recognizance. And in order to come to that determination, the discretion that the judges used was this. They asked us, there was a survey with this agency called the CJA, which asked, where do you work? How long have you worked there? Where do you live? How long have you lived there? How many years of school have you completed? And depending on how you scored on this survey, will state what your recommendation will be. And so though they don't show a person's propensity towards dangerousness, they show a person's propensity towards poverty. And that's, again, something that we're trying to take out of our bail system. And so judges also could do supervised release, where they mandate that people actually get the services that they need, whether it's housing or employment, or mental health services or drug abuse services. Which they did not have that opportunity in the past. And then they could also, if they choose to, institute electronic monitoring, which again was something that many of our state judges didn't have access to, whether there was resources for it or otherwise. We believe that we gave judges more tools in their toolbox than taken away.
You used an acronym earlier, DAT. What is DAT? I'm
sorry, a DAT is a desk appearance ticket.
Oh,
and so,
okay.
Generally speaking, I'll say, I had this conversation with a few pastors the other day, right? If one of their, say someone on your block, this young person is not the type of person who's involved in the criminal justice system. They're good kids, they're going to school every day, yada, yada, yada. And they get arrested for, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, maybe with the wrong people, as many young people do. And you're like, you know what, Latrice, I need you to call me over to the precinct because this young man is not the right person in order to be in that particular situation, which so many people have done. And then we go downtown or we go over to the police department, we think a desk appearance ticket is warranted here. This young person is doing this and they have school tomorrow. They got to go to work and blah, 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 blah. And so the police officer will say, well, let me go and see if I can get this approved through the state police system or whatever their system is. And if it's approved, then that person will get a desk appearance ticket to be brought back to court on their own, as opposed to having to spend the night sleeping on a cot or a plank as central booking. And so this is not a new phenomenon. Like, this is something that some people have and some people don't, depending on your access and your ability to be able to advocate for yourself or have a strong advocate for you. And we believe that we could take all of that away and just give this opportunity to people who are charged, not convicted, of low-level minor offenses.
You use the term, this is not a new phenomenon. Well, there is a new phenomenon now. I believe it's newer because a lot of people are saying that there has been an uptick in violence committed by these people who are on bail. What's your response to that?
There's been an uptick in violence all across the country, and it's more so related to COVID than not, right? During COVID, things were shut down. People weren't getting access to the mental health services. They weren't getting access to their medication. And so folk were basically sort of left to their own devices as to how to deal with their pain, as to how to deal with their addictions or otherwise. In addition to that, there are two counties, including the very same county that I live in, that we live in, Kings County, where crime is actually down since bail reform, as opposed to being on the rise. In addition to that, the county of Westchester, crime is also being reported as having been down, even in the face that bail reform is available in the state of New York. And so there's some states where bail reform was never passed and crime is still going up. And so I think we need to do something about the proliferation of guns in our community. I think we need to have stronger gun laws to make sure that illegal guns don't wind up on the streets of Brownsville and other communities, East Flatbush, et cetera. And that's not the conversation that folk are willing to have. Instead, they're blaming bail reform, which we believe is misguided and misinformed.
This bill, the bail reform bill, was passed in 2019. Now, it has not come to the point where there are no changes. I believe you are currently meeting as an assembly to make some changes to this law. What is that?
Well, there are actively involved in budget negotiations at this moment. Even in the face, as we've said, that the law has been 99% effective, meaning 99% of the people who are arrested and released under bail reform are not committing any other crimes. Those are some very good odds. But however, the sensationalized media, the fact that we have some folk who are getting up and they're blaming everything that happened under the sun, even in circumstances where judges could have allotted and could have awarded bail to many individuals, they were not doing it because we were seeing a lot of judicial advocacy where there was basically like, I don't know, I'm confused. So according to bail reform and what the media said, let's get this person out the door, when that just was not the intention, the spirit, or the letter of the law. And so, it's again, we're having negotiations, but again, because there are no perfect laws. But the point that really strikes me is the fact that we have to make sure that we're not assuming by looking at an individual that this person may be more dangerous than the other person. By trying to make an assessment of pre-crime, because you were brought through this tribunal before, then you must have committed this crime, this crime that's being presented here today. And we believe that people should be afforded due process, that pre-crime is not something that any of us can determine. And we need to make sure that we don't have a system that will incarcerate Kalief Browder instead of because of him being in poverty, but because some judge believes that he is inherently dangerous and call that progress.
There are many critics who are calling for the law to be changed. Critics like New York Mayor Adams and also Governor Kathy Hochul. What are some of these changes? I know the mayor has said that there should be higher penalties or stiffer penalties, or the bill should be stronger than it is. Speak to the critics who are calling for these changes.
Well, if I can speak to those critics, I'll say that the safest communities have the most resources and not the highest incarceration rates. And we're not going to incarcerate ourselves out of this problem. Now, some of the changes that they're looking at trying to make include, of course, an institution of a dangerousness standard, where again, there is some rubric or algorithm where they're asking judges to basically make a determination after having seen someone for probably about 3 minutes of their lives and say that you're dangerous, and so that bail should be instituted on you. There was a report recently done by the Office of Court Administration that basically found that there are many judges across our state that have exercised discrimination and inherent biases within their jurisdictions, and it's something that's it's no mystery to many individuals. But we have documented evidence of these occurrences at this moment. And I think it becomes too dangerous for us to rely on the opinion of someone who's only seen somebody for 3 minutes, like what is being proposed by the mayor as well as by the governor.
Many members of the community are concerned about their safety. How does this bill address the safety issues specifically?
Well, again, 99.99% of the people who were arrested on bail reform have not committed any new crimes. And so it allows for people to participate in the economy so that they can go back to work. I'll never forget the young man who came into our office, and the police department put a $1 bail hold, not the police department, the district attorney's office put a $1 bail hold on him. So we got on the telephone to call his family to say, could you go downtown and pay this $1? And we were told, I don't have the car fare to get downtown to pay the $1. The young man worked at the Salvation Army. And he had a baby that was less than a year old. And so, you know, I think that the cost with respect to this young man not being in the community, not being able to go back to work, could have potentially driven him into an underground economy that none of us want. And quite frankly, I live in a neighborhood that I represent. And I'm also raising my daughter there. And my brother was murdered in that very same neighborhood when I was a kid. So I want to be safe, and just like everyone else, and I want all of our families to be safe. But I also believe that our civil rights don't have to pay the price for this ill-conceived notion of public safety when the two things are not necessarily bumping heads with one another. Do I think we need to do something about guns? Absolutely. Do I think we need to afford young people more opportunity? Absolutely. Do I think that the remedy to gun violence are cure violence programs where they have violence interrupters who are on the ground, who are addressing crime, who are squashing beef? Absolutely. And then there should be an opportunity, whether it's education or a job, and safety at the end of that tunnel.
People are concerned, as I said at the beginning of this program, about the anger issues that they see on the street and in the subway. And there are lots of people who are avoiding the subway because of these issues. What do you say to them to appease them and to perhaps eradicate this fear?
I believe that the mayor's plan to deploy more mental health providers in the subway system is a great way to begin to address the circumstances of homelessness. Quite frankly, people were living in the subway systems because many of our mental health beds were closed down. And if you're closing these services, then people have nowhere to go. And they're gonna go to a place that is warm, quite frankly. And we think about what was happening in the subway during COVID. It was one of the most cleanest, you know, opportunities to ever ride in a subway than at least I've ever seen in my lifetime. And so I believe that with all of those investments in infrastructure, more people were relegated down into that scenario. And I believe that we need to provide the services that are necessary in order to get people the treatment that is required so that we could have some modicum of a perception of safety from the people who are mentally health, and provide homes for the homeless.
Are you still taking the lead on the revisions, I believe, to this act?
I am a part of a body of 106 members of the Democratic Conference of the New York State Assembly, and our leadership is none other than Speaker Carl Hastie and Majority Leader Crystal Peoples-Stokes. But I do appreciate the opportunity to have garnered the respect of my colleagues around this issue area. And I will continue to exalt whatever expertise that I have on the area. And we're still cranking along. We're still figuring out what's the best outcome for the people of the state of New York. If everyone walks away unhappy, then I guess we know that we've done our job.
You live in an area where there are lots of minorities in the population. What do you say to minorities in terms of being fearful of certain aspects of this new law? What do you say to people in your neighborhood? And what do you say to minorities across New York?
I will say what I've been saying, that, you know, there is, and quite frankly, there was an article that was co-authored by Governor Hochul as well as Mayor Adams that Governor Hochul and Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins, who indicated that the rise in crime is not connected to bail reform. And so I will say it's time to move you off that needle because there is no correlation with bail reform and the rise in crime across our communities. We do believe that there is something that needs to be done with respect to the gun violence, but we are answering a political question and not a legal, rational question that's supported by empirical data.
Thank you, Assembly Member and lead sponsor of the Bail Reform Act that was passed in 2019. We thank you, Assemblymember Walker, for being on Brooklyn 45 and giving the explanations that many of our listeners, many of our viewers, many people who live in New York have been asking and are concerned about. Thank you again for being on Brooklyn 45.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to coming back.
My next guest is seeking to unseat an incumbent New York State Senator. David Alexis, welcome to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very honored to be here today.
Okay, tell us why you are running to unseat the incumbent.
So one of the reasons why I'm running for office is that I'm continuing the work that I've done in the community as a community organizer. Being a community organizer is not just a hobby or just a thing I do extra, but something that I've done to survive. I'm a father. I'm the son of 2 Haitian immigrants. I am the husband of an amazing sickle cell warrior, and I'm a working New Yorker. And in order to be the provider that I wanted to be for my family within this community, to set a good example for my kids, I was only able to do all of these things through organizing, through the support and investment that this community, Flatbush, had invested in me. And over the last 8 years of organizing, I have sought to pay forward what was invested in me. So in a nutshell, I'll share a bit more about my story as we go along, but from working with members in the sickle cell community to other fathers who, like myself, who were looking to make a change around how we impacted our family, working with other parents around earlier intervention and other early childhood programs to improve our educational outcomes for our kids. The work that I did with my other people in the community around pushing for policies that we needed because of the divestment that had hit our communities, to even organizing with other drivers as I had become an Uber driver to take care of my family, and organizing what is now the largest worker cooperative by member count in the entire United States. So all of those things over the last 8 years all came through just organizing with people to deliver what my family needed, what this community needed, and whatnot.
What are some of the needs that you believe are not being met? What are some of the burning issues that concern you?
So to put it simply, first and foremost, we are not able to stay safe and secure in our homes. Housing prices have continued to increase. It has been very difficult to go to find a space to live. When I first got married, my wife and I had applied for an apartment. It took in 2014, from when we had gotten married, we had not heard back from that apartment until 2021, as an example. And this is not a unique story to me and alone. This happens to so many other families. Healthcare. My wife have sickle cell disease, and seeing a system that has treated her with such contempt has been such a problem. When a healthcare provider tells your wife that she is a bad mother because she's going through a sickle cell crisis, is beyond the pale. And so I organized to take around that, from the insurance, from insurance that continued to try to push her off to not cover her expenses, to dealing with providers who were not able to give her the care because of costs and what was covered, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
To all of these other items. These are some of the very important things. And lastly, the jobs to make sure we could provide for our families, and of course, a climate catastrophe, which has increased our energy costs, but also created a pandemic of asthma in our communities. These are the things.
What is the one thing that you like to tell people who would be considering voting for you?
I am taking on an incumbent who has been here for 20 years, who has been tinkering around the edges, and we need big change to do that. And we only do that by organizing. Power can be defined by organized money or organized people. And if a vote for David Alexis for the State Senate District 21 goes that.
David Alexis, running for State Senate in the 21st District and running to unseat an incumbent whose name you just heard. David, thank you for being on Brooklyn 45, and we wish you success.
Thank you.
Well, please tell everyone you know on social media to watch Brooklyn 45. On behalf of our team, I am Sam Taitt.